Hey everybody, I'm Tim Hockett. Today we're going to talk about the importance of setting a good example. In an earlier video I talked about responsibility, and I said there was personal responsibility, which involves behaving yourself to the degree that you're able, taking care of your bills and not being a burden to others. But it also means putting forth a good effort, to avoid those landmines in life like addiction or too much credit card debt or turning to crime. Let me say here that those mistakes are not irredeemable, but life is much easier when you avoid some mistakes altogether. But I also mentioned social responsibility. That is responsibility to the community, like doing your fair share to support schools and other public services, being mindful that you live among other people, being a good neighbor. The most immediate or closest application of social responsibility is setting a good example. I say that's social responsibility because humans tend to be social beings. Other eyes are watching us. I've said already a few times that the family is a great laboratory for ethical behavior. Parents become well aware of that when they hear their son or daughter say their first bad word, for the first time, and then they wonder, oh, where'd they learn? Did they learn that from me? My point is we become well aware of our example as we watch our kids reflect us. Sadly, some parents aren't very careful. So I'm going to take a minute to ask every parent to be careful of your example. Whether you like it or not, you're modeling behavior for your kids. Keep that in mind. But children aren't the only ones watching us, are they? People on the highways watch us as we commute, our colleagues in the office, our neighbors see us. They all watch us. Again, we should care about the example we set. As you mull over how you behave and you mull over your example, you should ask yourself this question. Would you like everyone to behave like you do? Some among us actually invite more scrutiny by taking leadership roles. I mentioned that before, that part of the definition of responsibility is allowing yourself to be held accountable. So we say, well, the boss is ultimately responsible. If we ask who's responsible here, we all know we're asking for the leader or the boss. People in leadership positions are watched by lots of people, and their example becomes much more critical. I've trained many executives and told them that one of their first responsibilities is to set a proper tone for their organization. They have to set an example. Interestingly, the higher up your leadership takes you, the more you are scrutinized, because as a community, state, or national leader, more people watch you. And quite frankly, the more people that watch, the more they should be able to expect from your example. Can you see where this is going? Our political leaders actually invite our scrutiny, and by running for higher office, we can and should expect a good example from them. Sadly, that doesn't always happen. Some set a very poor example. But there's something just as bad. If that leader is popular and the leader sets a poor example, his followers may stoop so low as to actually defend bad behavior. They begin to sound like parents with that spoiled child who just won't admit that he misbehaves. That's called enabling, and it is a disservice to America, isn't it? The reason it is as bad, or maybe even worse, is that the enablers really and truly know better. What a shame. I'm going to read a list here, and it's painful to share, but maybe by hearing this, you'll join me in wanting our leaders to set a much better example. I bring this up because just today, Senator Bob Menendez has been presented with indictments for bribery and corruption charges, and it is a very damning indictment. He's to be presumed innocent, of course, but it just doesn't look good. I got a few others I want to mention to you, both Democrats and Republicans. Former Representative Jeff Fortenberry, a Republican from Nebraska, found guilty in 2022 of 3 felonies in a case that centered on campaign contributions. Former Representative T.J. Cox, a Democrat from California, still awaiting trial on a 22 indictment, including fraudulent campaign contributions. Former Representative Duncan Hunter, a Republican from California, sentenced to 11 months in prison for misusing campaign funds. He was pardoned by Trump. Former Representative Chris Collins, a Republican from New York, sentenced to 26 months in prison for insider trading. That means he knew what was going to happen with stocks, either bought or sold to his advantage, and then it happened and he was made wealthy one way or the other. He was pardoned by Trump. Former Representative Corrine Brown, a Democrat from Florida, served more than 2 years for setting up a false charity. Former Representative Steve Stockman, a representative from Texas, was sentenced to 10 years in prison for multiple felonies, including fraud and money laundering. He was pardoned by Trump. Former Representative Anthony Weiner, a Democrat from New York, sentenced to 21 months for sexual misconduct. Former Representative Chaka Fattah, a Democrat from Pennsylvania, sentenced to 10 years in prison for racketeering, fraud, money laundering. Former Representative Michael Grimm, a Republican from New York, pleaded guilty and sentenced to 8 months in prison for tax evasion. Attempted to run again for Congress, by the way. Former Representative Rick Renzi, a Republican from Arizona, sentenced to 3 years for corruption. He was pardoned by Trump. And the list goes on and on and on. I'm frustrated that this has happened. And of course, the big elephant in the room is the former president's behavior himself. Just today, a judge found him liable for fraud in the civil case against his businesses in New York. His sons evidently followed his example and were also found liable. You recall he was already found liable by a court for sexual assault and defamation against E. Jean Carroll in May. The court awarded her $5 million, and in this case, the amount of award has not come down yet, but the prosecutors are recommended a $250 million judgment against him. The former president also faces 91 various felony counts in 4 different jurisdictions for his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Remember what that means. He wanted the votes against him thrown out, all 80 million of them. He had a charity, and it needed to be closed down before he became president in 2016 because it was found that he was using it as his own personal slush fund, a charity, accepting donations, using it for personal use. I may do a separate episode on the former president's pardons, but several people who were convicted of lying to the FBI in the Russia investigations subsequently went to jail or were on their way when President Trump pardoned them, essentially rewarding them for not telling the truth. That is enabling of the worst kind. I've said enough. We need to set a good example. We need to expect more from our political leaders. We're being watched, and we are watching others. Let's be good. In fact, let's unite behind goodness and decency. Sorry to bring this long list. Think about it. Thanks for watching. I'm Tim Hockett. Hey, before you go, I want you to know that I'm just trying to do my part to help us overcome crippling division in America. You can really help by subscribing, by watching these videos, and by sharing them with others. Hope you have a great day.